He's been on 17 board of directors, worked in 25 countries, and has been a CEO of a Fortune 100 company. This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Cyrus Freidheim. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio in Southern California and Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, today we're going to talk about management consulting, international business, and how to manage your career from one of the business greats of our country. His name is Cyrus Freidheim, and we're going to talk about his new book. It's Insider Advice. It's really all about commit and deliver on the front lines of management consulting, and it's a lot of inside information as to what goes on in management consulting, Cyrus's career, and how to manage your career. So let's talk a little bit about Cyrus. He's got a 55-year business career, and he's still at it. He worked at Union Carbide, Price Waterhouse, Ford, Booz Allen Hamilton, Chiq-uita brands, the Sun-Times Media Group, 17 corporate boards, numerous nonprofits across 25 countries, and every continent he's worked in except for Antarctica, and who knows, there's still time for that. He's author of the seminal book, $1 Trillion Enterprise, and I'm delighted that he's here to share his wisdom with us on Guys Radio, because he truly has a lot. So Cyrus Freidheim, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So after all your years in business, what do you see as the role of management consulting now, and how do you see it changing over the years?
Well, over the years, it's changed dramatically. When I started back in the mid-'60s, we were smart guys going into a company with a pad and a pencil and ask a lot of questions just in general about the company to figure out where it was going and what the issues were. Today, management consultants are far more specialized by industry, by functions such as finance or marketing or production or information technology, or some other kinds of technology as well. So the biggest difference is the specialization.
Now, you laying at the groundwork for your career, you began as a chemical engineer, and nowadays so many people kind of make some twists and turns and shifts while managing their career. I was on the client side, and then I went over to the agency side, which is a little contradictory, but what it seems like you have to follow your passion, love what you do, and it'll love you back. So how did you make the move, and why did you make the move from chemical engineering to business side?
Well, first, the reason I did chemical engineering, this was I graduated from high school in 1953. And just think about the times we were just out of World War II. The Reconstruction was going on. The shortage of engineers was gigantic. And the line of recruiters at schools of engineering were miles long. Somebody told me that really you ought to be an engineer. I decided long ago before that I wouldn't be a doctor, which was kind of the family profession, because I couldn't stand the sight of blood and fainted when I saw a needle. So I figured this wasn't in the cards for me. So I enjoyed chemistry, so I decided chemical engineering. Within a year, I realized I would not be a chemical engineer. I found the laboratory that had non-challenging, boring, difficult to keep attention to it. And so, but I didn't change. And if I had a mentor at that time who really understood me and what the opportunities and options were, I would have changed. But I stuck it out, and I went through and I got my chemical engineering degree. I got it cum laude, which was good. But I knew I wasn't going to be a chemical engineer on the day I graduated. Actually, after the first year, I knew it, but certainly on the day I graduated. So I then went into the Navy. I focused my spare time on educating myself in a liberal arts, with a liberal arts program of reading. I went and signed up for the Russian language school in the Navy, so I'd get another language. At that time, Russian was rarely spoken in the United States by anybody. And I
want to take a time out. I think we should start again, because I did a lousy job on my introduction. and I didn't get to how to pronounce your name. And I also want to make sure that we have time for all the questions, because I didn't advise you to like keep it short like you did for your first
Okay.
answer. So we're going to start again. All right. No worries
All right.
there. Okay. So when I go, let me just go back. All right. 5-minute mark. Okay. 11:58 stopped. Okay, today we're going to talk about management consulting and how to manage your career. We've got one of the greats. His name is Cyrus Freidheim, and he's got a new book. It's called Commit and Deliver, to help you get ahead in your career, especially when taking on a new direction in your work. We're also going to talk about how to grow professionally and how you think through complex business problems from the bottom through retirement. Today's guest, Cyrus, has done it all. 55-year business career, Union Carbide, Price Waterhouse, Ford, Booz Allen Hamilton, Chiq-uita brands, Sun Times Media. So he's been working across so many different categories, 17 corporate boards he's served on, numerous nonprofits, 25 countries he's worked in, and every continent besides Antarctica, and there's still time for that. He's author of $1 Trillion Enterprise and the new book, Commit and Deliver, on the Frontiers of Management Consulting. It's a terrific book. I read it over the weekend. It's got great insights into Cyrus's career and also how to manage your own career. My very special guest on Guys Radio, Cyrus Freidheim. Welcome to the show, Cyrus.
Thank you very much, Robert.
Now, is it Freidheim or Freidheim? I'm sorry.
Freidheim.
Freidheim. Okay, very good. Now, after
it's mispronounced, but that's based on the spelling. It should be either Freidheim or Freidheim.
Okay.
But you know,
Freidheim. Okay, we've got it.
Think. I don't know.
All right. After all your years in business, what do you see as the role of management consulting and do you see it changing?
Yeah, what's happened over the last 50 or so years, or more than that, since I joined in the middle 60s, we were generalists. Today, they're specialists. They focus on industries, and even within an industry, on finance or marketing or things like that. And so that's the fundamental difference. But the primary mission of a management consultant is to work with the management of the company to run it better, to help them run it better. That has stayed the same.
Now, like many folks, you started out in one career path and you kind of shifted to another, but you leveraged what you had learned and saw what really turned you on. So you went from chemical engineering to the business side, and you worked with two major automobile manufacturers initially, Chrysler and Ford. Now, for decades, Ford and then GM and Chrysler, they dominated the market until the advent of the Japanese automakers, who entered the market and had a feel for efficiency in terms of production. What happened in the automobile market, and why were our companies not paying attention?
Well, yeah, when I was with Ford, the U.S. automotive companies dominated both the U.S. market with probably 95% of the total sales, and internationally, they were way over half of the international market. They got blindsided during the 70s. The Japanese came in with a small car that was significantly less costly, and the U.S. automotive company simply said, that's not what Americans want to buy. And they were wrong. And they allowed Japan to get a marketing foothold, meaning both distribution as well as acceptance of product during the 1970s. Today, the automotive market in the United States, I think the US companies are probably less than half, and Japan is about a third. So it's a remarkable shift, and I say they were simply asleep at the switch. Common in a lot of industries.
That's amazing, because not only were they asleep at the switch back then, but then they let Lexus come into the market through the Japanese companies, which really took a luxury car and made it affordable. And everybody, and Lexus, I had one. You just turn it on and it runs. They're very efficient cars, and so many Americans, they're a little bit wary about buying American cars. What is your sense of all that now? Do you think American car companies have now got a handle on this, or is everything so interrelated now that the foreign car companies are in with the American car companies. The production is all over the place, and you really can't tell the difference. What's really going on there, Cyrus?
Well, the Lexus story is being repeated today with Tesla. And I mean, everybody saw the electric car as coming. Everybody. I mean, there wasn't a car company in the world that didn't understand that. I remember a conversation I had with Wagoner, who was at that time just out of the CEO spot at GM, and he thought that within by 19 or 2050, probably half the cars on the road would be electric, and yet the American car companies allowed another company, Tesla, to come in and preempt the market. It's a spectacular product with a completely different vision of how to build a car. The car companies tried to replace the internal combustion engine with an electric engine. What Tesla did is it took a computer and built a car around it. A fundamentally different approach. And that's basically what happened with the Japanese, both in the 70s when they got into the market, as well as the Lexus, which I agree with you was a seminal change in the market when they built the Lexus for the United States market. It is not for the Japanese market, and it's designed to beat the top line U.S. companies and products, and they did it. Lexus is a spectacular product.
Now let's take a step back and look at this whole situation, because a couple of things come up. One, I always wonder about, like, okay, for the last 50 years or so, there's been very little progress in terms of automobiles and even airplanes. We had the Concorde for a while. They took that back. Now there's something else that's kind of like that. Man has gone to the moon and then nothing for 50 years. The cars we have, they have more computer parts, but it's still in many ways the fossil fuel combustible engine. Now it's being forced through shaking up the marketplace by Tesla. But what is going on? And then with the gas prices going through the roof now, connected with that, is this the fossil fuel companies kind of their last gasp, is holding on and seeing how much profit they can squeeze right now before it's over? Or what's happening right now with the whole industry, with cars, fossil fuel, moving to new energy resources? And do you think technology is being held back from the American public and from consumers all over the world?
Yeah, no, I don't think technology is being held back. We're moving, but more moderately. The car companies or I should say the industry is moving at a more moderate pace than the media would want and that the government wants. But we can't shut down fossil fuels right now because we happen to be dependent on fossil fuels. We don't have the electric capacity to have all electric cars, for example. The transition is a gigantic transition. It is not just the product or not even just the energy source. It's how it's distributed. You got right now, you've got service stations all over the country with gas. You've got different kinds of sales vehicles that are all going to be replaced. We're in a huge transformation of the industry. So I think we need to be a little patient. It's clearly what's happened. We had a little blip in the energy market, and we have so downgraded the importance of fossil fuels and hindered their expansion and filling the needs of a society like ours when we have a hiccup in in Ukraine. That we just have to realize this transition has got to be managed in a much more thoughtful way. It's still not clear whether the all electric engine or some hybrid is going to be the winner, because the requirement for electricity for an all electric vehicle and the inefficiency of delivering that with today's technology is so great that our consumers may say, no, I'd rather go hybrid, because hybrid, develops its own electricity. So you don't have to have new power plants, which is a tremendous advantage. And maybe even if you look at the whole energy equation, it might be a energy conservation or even CO2 a reduction program or solution to have the hybrid rather than the all electric. So a couple of big questions that let to go.
I totally get it, and very insightful. But the gas prices, what do you see happening over the next 6 months to a year? I mean, is this the new normal now? We're going to have $6 gas all the time? Or, I mean, there's 264 billion barrels of fuel. The United States has more fuel than any place. The OPEC is not releasing their, they turn the tap on and off. It seems like the American consumer is being, the foot is on the neck there. What can be done? What's going to happen here? This is not, everything seems to be going crazy where the market's down and the prices are up and people are already living paycheck to paycheck and coming out of the pandemic and now monkeypox and all this stuff. It's like, what's going on here, Cyrus? You've been around for a long time. What's happening?
Right. My view, and this is just one person's view, but it's that is informed by a lot of history and what's going on, is that we will have high gas prices until supply returns and supply and demand balance. Right now, we've got demand exceptionally higher, a lot higher than supply. And so the government dragging their feet on new leases or even canceling leases is just crazy right now. If you want lower gas prices. If you believe that the world is going to explode in a year if we don't cut CO2 down, well, then, yeah, that might be a good solution, but I don't believe that. I believe that the CO2 problem is a very long-term problem, and our economy is a short-term problem, which we must fix because we've got probably 100 million people that are worse than living paycheck to paycheck. They're going without, and not just infant formula, but they're going without. And because they can't drive. For example, the diesel is up over $6, and that's our whole infrastructure. All the trucks and trains and not planes, but trucks and railroad and require diesel. Well, the guys that are the truckers, they're getting killed. And so they've got to raise their prices. So this is forcing prices up. The idea that the government is going to take a couple of dribbles out of a very small diesel reserve is showboat. That's political. That's not going to have any impact at all on the price of diesel. We need more diesel oil to supply the trucks and trains and other vehicles that are supplying, taking care of the supply chain. Until we get the supply chain fixed, we're not going to have inflation won't moderate.
What's your timetable? What do you see until we have some easing?
Well, it depends on very much on what we do. If the government changes policy, I think 6, 9, 12 months would be a reasonable time frame. If the government continues to have its foot on the throat of oil production, no, it could be a couple year slump.
But just a little pushback on that, because I've been reading and I read that we have the largest reserves in the world's 264 billion barrels. And that by the time you opened up new leases and got that oil out there, it could be a couple of years and the whole situation could change. So this like drill doesn't really there seems to be a little bit of crying wolf there, because you also have OPEC that can increase production whenever they want.
Right. But they don't, because they're operating their own self-interest. Their self-interest says they look at the balance and they say, if we pump more oil, the price will go down, we'll make less money. And so they're operating in their self-interest, which we should expect them to do, just like we are. But no, the problem, and I'm not expert enough to get into the actual leases that are being held up, but the government has slowed down the new leases. Yes, it will take time on a brand new field, but other fields like the fracking can crank up very quickly, and the prices make it very attractive. So yes, we can accelerate the production of oil and gas near term if the government pushes it.
Okay. My very special guest, Cyrus Freidheim. His book is Commit and Deliver on the Front Lines of Management Consulting. So let's move around the world now, because as part of your work, you work with the oil, you worked with the gas, you worked with the auto companies, you worked with the airlines, and then you got in your management consulting, you went to Brazil, France, Australia, Argentina, Chile, Japan. Tell us about what you learned about kind of humanity from your travels and doing business around the world.
There are a lot of smart people out there. There really are. And the problem that they face, and the countries you mentioned were mostly countries that are either developed countries or on their way to be, like Brazil. Argentina is just continues to shoot themselves in the foot politically, so they just can't get their stuff together. Unfortunately, a country which has extraordinary resources. But take Brazil, for example. Brazil has a lot of people, a reasonable education level, not as good as Argentina, but they've got a lot of smart people. And they've gone back and forth between military dictatorship and democracy. And unfortunately, many of their sallies with democracy have been ridden with corruption. So in my mind, the biggest issue facing the developing world is just that. It's corrupt government. I'm writing a new book called A Star of Africa, which takes a mythical country, and the dictator decides in his old age to convert it from a horrible totalitarian dictatorship into a democracy. And it deals with this kind of problem. What does it take for these countries to be successful? I think they can be. I think the United States and Europe have a large role to play in getting them, if we don't just go in there and rape and pillage their economies, which is what happened in Africa for the last 200 years. So I believe a lot of these countries have the potential. They've certainly got smart people, and with help and with financing, they could come around. But they've got to do it without corruption, because corruption is corrosive to development.
That's tough, but you mentioned the whole idea, the concept of predatory capitalism, which kind of can get in the way sometimes, because
yes,
you want a free market, but the free market sometimes can be as corrupt as the government. But it seems like the free market can work out some of its problems a lot more efficiently than government. In other words, if you had a pile of dirt in front of your house, who would you want to remove it, the government or a private company? And I'd say most smart people would say the private company just is more efficient. So we just have to have some guardrails in terms of some of the public corporations. Media, you got into the media business with the Sun-Times in Chicago, just at the point where, and I was in the same business where, in advertising, where things moved from print to digital. What do you see happening now? Is it over for print?
Well, I think that print will last forever in some forms, but the daily newspaper is certainly a threatened animal. I see a few newspapers continuing, the national ones, but we're losing, I don't know how many hundreds of newspapers every year for the last, since I was in the business, which was a little over 10 years ago. And I do see it continuing. The key measures you look at are, what are the revenues of circulation and advertising? They're the two key things that keep newspapers afloat. And both of those are declining at a pace of somewhere between 5 and in the case of advertising, it was, for a while, it was 10%. I'm not current on the last few years, but at that pace, only one thing can happen. The newspapers are shrinking, which they already have done, and they're going out of business. But remarkably, they're holding on. My old paper recently sold, I think for the third time since I was there, to a not-for-profit. This is a new model, and I've talked to other newspapers which are considering the same thing. So there are models that are important. One of the things that I did when I first joined the Sun-Times is we did a study of cohorts over 65 and then every 10-year group under that. And the curve of regular readership was quite clear. for the over 65 group, it was 75%.
Right.
It's remarkable. And then it just went straight down to like 10% for those coming out of college. My kids don't read newspapers. My grandkids may or may not know what a newspaper was. So do I see there a future for them? Not a growth future, certainly. There may be some specialized things. We maybe have a couple of general newspapers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, but that's probably it.
Okay. Last question, because we're tight on time. Chiq-uita Brands, your business career is amazing, and your insights are so spot on. When you got you were CEO of Chiq-uita, and you learned very quickly that they're a commodity type product, that branding is not as leverageable a tool as it is for other types of consumer products. You want to just touch on that real quickly?
Sure. In the 40s, for those of us who were around at the time, we were drilled with the Chiq-uita limerick, Chiq-uita banana.
Right, the jingle, right? Yeah.
The jingle, yeah, tremendous. So name recognition was gigantic, and grocery stores were small, and they all carried Chiq-uita. Chiq-uita carried a premium of about 20% over the other products, including Dole and Del Monte, the other two branded products, and the other stuff that's coming in, like from Ecuador, probably 40%. Well, during the 60s and 70s, the grocery industry consolidated, first regionally, then nationally. And of course, then the manager of the purchasing said, well, why am I paying more for Chiq-uita? It's a banana. I mean, exactly. You look at the two, and if you don't have a sticker on it, you can't tell the difference. You can't taste the difference. They are, matter of fact, they're the same strand of plant on all companies. So they had lost their brand position. And in the United States, they couldn't get a premium. And yet we were still advertising. We were still treating it like a brand. And I said, no, brands sell based on advertising and quality and issues like that, at least quality in the mind of the buyer. Commodities sell on price. We had a canned vegetable business, for example, that 10 cents could change the sale on a contract for a case of 40 cans. And so that's what commodities are like. Now, bananas haven't gotten down to that low a margin, but they are, because there are product differences and quality that, in the processing and delivery of them. But we changed the economics and the treatment of it dramatically when I went to Chiq-uita.
Fantastic insights. The name of the book, Commit and Deliver on the Front Line of Management Consulting. You'll learn so much from this book. I did, and it's really insightful. I got to give you credit because you are so adaptable. You have so much great experience. And thank you, Cyrus Freidheim, for being my special guest here on Guys Radio. Thank you, Cyrus.
Thank you, Robert.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week on Guys Radio and TV, please support us by subscribing to our channels. Thanks.